Over the course of a year, I recorded how many Primogems I earned every day. Hello, Count Sacke here back with another Genshin Impact video. Today, I would like to talk about a more personal project of mine that I've been working on behind the scenes. Around the time of the Genshin Impact 1-year anniversary, Hoyoverse rolled out a feature on HoYoLab Mobile. This new feature was the Traveler's Diary, which detailed how many Primogems a person earns each month and where it comes from, along with their mora. Little did Hoyoverse actually know that I was already keeping track of this data months before this was rolled out. So, after a year of tracking my Primogem count, this graph summarizes almost everything. It might look a little confusing at first, but don't worry, I'll explain in detail. So now let's get into the main course. This is the spreadsheet. Let's explore how this works. There are two sheets present, dailies and overall. Under the daily sheet, there are a few columns. Primos gained and primos spent are pretty self-explanatory. For instance, if I complete a daily commission, this gives 10 Primogems. I will then put a 10 under primos gained. Primos plus and primos minus add up all the values indicated under primos gained and primos spent, respectively. Fates gained, fates spent, fates plus, and fate minus pretty much do the same exact thing as the Primogem counterpart, but instead it takes into account specifically only for intertwined fates. So this means we don't talk about acquaint fates in these spreadsheets, it's only intertwined fates. So let's consider a more grounded example. Let's assume that I have no intertwined fates, but I want to do a 10 pull. I can go to the shop and buy 10 intertwined fates for 1,600 Primogems. I would put the 1,600 under the primos spent column and put the 10 under the fates gained column. Lastly, if I instead decided to only roll 5 times, I would put 5 under fates spent. In summary, dailies is mostly a calculator for making the addition much faster. Now for the big one, the overall sheet. You can clearly see that there's a lot to talk about. Let's go through all the columns starting from left to right. First off is the date. It's simply in day, month, year format. Second is Primos Plus. This is the amount of Primogems that I earned in total for that day. Third is Primos Minus, which is the amount of Primogems I spent in total for that day. Fourth is Net Primos. It can be interpreted as profit, or it just shows if there was an overall gain or loss in Primogems that day. It can be calculated with this formula. Net Primos equals Primos plus subtracted by Primos minus. Fifth is current Primos. This is the amount of Primogems I have at hand. If we take a look at the game right now, we can see I have this many Primogems. Looking back at the spreadsheet, we can see that the value is the exact same amount. This can be calculated easily with this formula. Current Primos n plus 1 is equal to current Primos n plus net Primos n. I can also use current Primos as a way to double check my values for Primos plus and Primos minus. Sixth is Primos till fate. So you know how for every 160 Primogems you can get one intertwined fate? Well, this basically tracks how close I am to being able to get another multiple of 160. Say for example, I have 300 Primogems. With that amount, I can buy only one intertwined fates. Under the Primos till fate column, it would indicate 20 because I would need 20 more Primogems if I want to be able to buy 2 intertwined fates. This metric isn't anything important, I just put it there because I wanted to. The formula I derived is simply the following. Primos till fate n is equal to 160 subtracted by my current Primos n mod 160. This mod 160 is the modulo function. Determining the value of a modulo function can be simply done by doing division and taking the remainder. If you want a more formal definition of it, here. Seventh is average Primos plus. This is the average of all the Primos plus from the current day to the first day I started recording Primogems. In short, average Primos plus for the nth day is equal to 1 over n, the summation of Primos plus from the first day to the nth day. Eighth, fates plus underscore primos. This value is the total amount of intertwined fates that I could gain if I converted all of my Primogems to them. The formula for this is the following. Fates primos plus sub n is equal to the floor of current primos n divided by 160. Floor of x is defined as the floor function, which rounds down x to the greatest integer less than or equal to it. So for example, the floor of 15.2 is equal to 15, the floor of 1 is 1, the floor of negative 1.1 is equal to negative 2, and the floor of 100.9 is equal to 100. Ninth is fates plus. This is how many intertwined fates that I gained in total for a day. 10th is fates minus. This is how many intertwined fates I spent in a day. You could also just say it's the number of times I rolled on the character or weapon banners in a day. 11th is net fates. Just like net primos, its formula is very similar, where net fates is equal to fates plus subtracted by fates minus. 12th is current fates. This is the amount of intertwined fates that I should have at hand. It can be calculated with this formula. Current fates n plus 1 is equal to current fates n plus net fates n. Again, this metric can also be used to double check my values to see if everything was correct. And finally, we have potential fates. This is simply the total amount of intertwined fates I could have on my account at the current moment. In other words, this is the total amount of rolls I could do at a given time. The formula that is used to calculate this is potential fates n is equal to current fates n plus fates underscore primos plus n. Tracking this value is very important for me because it allows me to see if I can afford to get a character or if the cost is worth it. During some of my summoning videos, especially during my attempt at getting Yaemiko, I was actively monitoring my rolls using this spreadsheet. The reason why is because I want to make sure I can get the characters I want the most while still having some leeway for some other possible characters that I may want in the future. Now that we've gone through all of the different aspects of the spreadsheet, before I actually show you the data, I would like to point some things out and make disclaimers. The data that you will see is influenced by how a person plays the game. For instance, someone who grabs all of the new chests, achievements, quests, and so on as soon as the content is released may show different results than someone who typically only does their dailies while only doing other content much more passively. With that in mind, I would like to describe my profile. I started playing this game about a week or two after the game officially launched. I have known about Genshin Impact before its 1.0 release, and I actually wanted to play in the beta, but I decided not to. As of the time I am making this video, I am still a free-to-play player. I have had plans on making in-game purchases, but never enacted on those thoughts. If you're wondering, I have considered spending not to get characters more easily, but because I believe Hoyoverse has made a game worth supporting. I will not go into any other details, and I will not fight any people in the comments or whatever. I lean more towards someone who doesn't rush through all of the new content and instead prefer to do it at my own pace. I will do quests if they are required for specific events, but otherwise I will wait until I believe it is the right time to do them. I have done my dailies every day for a long time, and note that the first date indicated on the spreadsheet is not when I joined the game. Another disclaimer I would like to point out is this. Please do not use this data as evidence to make any claims about Hoyoverse. Consider multiple factors to support your conclusions. As I have mentioned, the amount of Primogems someone may earn in a day depends on their playstyle, so these values may vary from person to person. I would like to repeat, do not make conclusions based on this evidence alone. Consider many other factors. With that said, here is the graph once again. This is 1 year's worth of collecting Primogems. This chart tracks 3 specific values as seen on the legend in the bottom: average Primos Plus, potential fates, and Primos Plus. Notice how they say left or right scale. This is important because if you read it wrong, you'll get completely different metrics for what values they could be. You read average Primos Plus and Primos Plus by looking at the values on the left side, while for potential fates, you look at the right side. Also notice how I set the intervals on the scales. The Primogem scale is based on the 160 Primogems per fate, and the Intertwined Fates scale is based on hard pity, assuming you're at 0 pity. What's interesting is that you can also gather some other information from this chart. There are noticeable spikes in Primos Plus at equidistant intervals. Those are the days a new patch drops. This one here is when Raiden Shogun had her first banner. If you're wondering, this is when the first anniversary took place. On this specific day, we got 900 compensation Primogems in the mail, which is why this spike is so large. Here I have a distribution chart for each day showing how frequently I earn a specific amount of Primogems. It appears to follow an exponential curve, which is to be expected, to be honest. Then I also have another frequency distribution, but this is specifically for average Primos Plus. This is used to help me understand the probability distribution and visually gauge what the average amount of Primogems you earn per day is likely to be. Going back to the top, we have the mean and standard deviations. Then there's this weird stuff. Well, let me get into some statistics so I can explain it to you. You can represent data in a frequency distribution as I showed earlier. If you have a probability distribution, you can determine the probability a sample will be within a range of values, which the probability is the area under the curve between that range. So to put things in English, you can see how likely it is for you to get a specific value by calculating the area under this curve. Focusing on what we have in the spreadsheet, the z-score tells me how many standard deviations away from the center of the distribution a value for the average Primogems per day is. The probability your z-score is greater than or equal to a specified z-value, one-tailed, is the probability that you have a higher average Primogems per day than that specified z-value. The probability that your z-score is less than or equal to a specified z-value, one-tailed, is the probability that you have a lesser average Primogems per day than the specified z-value. Both of these assume that the current average Primogems per day is the true value. However, I believe that is very unlikely, and I still need a lot more samples to really say for certain. So let's say that I want to see the probability the average Primogems per day is at most 60. I could actually determine the probability if I first calculate the z-score for 60, and plug it into the probability that z is less than or equal to the z-score for 60, and well, we get a very tiny number. However, this should not come as a surprise, because the data shows that on average, we get about 200 Primogems per day with a standard deviation of 13. Do keep in mind though, this does assume that the average Primogems per day is truly about 200, which again, I find very unlikely, and we'll just need to collect more samples to really see. If both of the one-tailed probabilities are closer to 50%, it is more likely that the current average Primogems per day is true. Now what I'm going to say will confuse you a lot. Because pz less than or equal to z, one-tailed has a smaller probability than pz greater than or equal to z, one-tailed, it is more likely that the average Primogems per day is less than what it currently is calculated to be. Let me say this in English. The probability that you get less than 190 Primogems per day is smaller than the probability that you get more than 190 Primogems per day. And that means that the average Primogems per day should be less than 190 Primogems per day. I know, it doesn't make much sense. How does the probability that the average Primogems per day being greater than its current assumed value mean that it's actually lesser? This isn't some strange phenomena. In fact, based on how probability is calculated from probability density functions, the interpretation is correct. Hear me out. Every day a new sample is added to the list. If the sample says that the average Primogems gained is very low, then it would be expected that the point would be on the farther left region of the probability distribution. This causes your z-score to be larger and the area on the left side of the sample's position to be much smaller. Because the area is the probability, then it does literally mean that the probability is smaller. The smaller probability does make sense because if it's on the far left region, there is less area. So let's put some sense back into this. You could think of it like this. The probability of getting an average Primogems per day less than our assumed to be true value is so low that it cannot be coincidence, and therefore our assumed to be true value must not be the correct one. Some of you might recall that I said that the average Primogems per day being at most 60 is very, very tiny. However, you cannot say that this means that the average Primogems per day is actually less than or equal to 60. That would be incorrect. The reason why this is incorrect is because I need to have a day where the average Primos Plus reaches a value of 60 in order to make that conclusion. Basically, I need some sort of data which shows that the average is 60 in order to make the conclusion. However, accounting for all 365 days, it shows that this is not likely to be the case. The probability density curve can be used to determine how likely a sample's value could occur within a range. I can understand that this can be quite difficult to grasp. This is statistics. I know, for sure. I've been there. It's been very difficult to understand this stuff. But whatever the case is, in short, the data tells me that the average Primogems per day is less than 198 Primogems per day. If you ask me, I would say that the average is more likely to be around 100 Primogems per day, but I'm not entirely sure. It might be higher, who knows? It might be lower. You'll just have to collect more data. You may have realized that I tend to use the spreadsheet for personal reasons. One of these things is to monitor my Primogem and Fate spending. I have defined 4 terms to quantify this data: Primogem and Fate efficiency and Primogem and Fate effectivity. On screen are formulas to calculate the efficiency and effectivity. So, what the heck do these efficiency and effectivity terms mean based on these definitions? In general, I've defined effectivity as the ratio of the amount spent to the amount gained. This value tells you exactly that. What amount of Primogems or Fates you spent versus how many you've earned. If the effectivity is less than 1, you're spending less than you earn. If the effectivity is exactly 1, you're breaking even. And if the effectivity is greater than 1, you're spending more than you earn. For me, the closer that the effectivity is closer to 0, the better, as it says that I gain more than I spend. Then for efficiency, this is universally defined as the net output over the total input. In the case of Primogems and Fates, it's the amount of Primogems or Fates you have currently saved up over the total Primogems or Fates that you have gained, not accounting for how much you've spent. So if the efficiency is closer to 0, that means that you don't save Primogems or Fates that much, and if the efficiency is closer to 1, that means you save up more than you spend. Ideally, I would prefer if this is closer to 1, as that means that I'm saving up more than I'm spending. One interesting relationship I would like to point out is, based on how I've defined efficiency and effectivity, there is a relationship between the two. The efficiency is equal to 1 minus the effectivity. I would like to note that the efficiency and effectivity can both be converted to a percentage by simply multiplying by 100, but I personally like to keep things as decimals. You might have noticed that the formulas for the Fate efficiency and Fate effectivity are much more complicated. The reason why this is the case is because it is defined in such a way that the amount of Primogems you convert to Fates does not change the values, because you're not actually spending any Fates when doing the conversion. So looking at my Primo effectivity, it is about 57%. This means that I spend 57% of the Primogems I gain. Looking at my Primo efficiency, it shows that I save up approximately 43% of all the Primogems I gain. For my Fate effectivity, it shows that I spend 61% of the Fates that I gain. So, yeah. Then for my Fate efficiency, it shows that I save up about 39% of the Fates I ever gain. I originally had been intending to make this video when I hit 100 days, but I wasn't able to make a video that I can say I was satisfied with despite having multiple complete recording sessions. I truly believe 1 year is probably the most appropriate time to make this project of mine public, and I think it does provide a bit of interesting insight, which started as a simple personal tracker of mine. I remember the reason why I started this was to see what is the true average number of Primogems that we get per day. Personally, I still don't think we're anywhere near to determining that, as I don't think I have enough samples. And I am quite doubtful to believe that we do earn 200 Primogems per day. So, yeah. The only thing we can do is just wait, and I'm still collecting data as we speak every single day. So, that's really about it for now, so thanks for watching and hope you've enjoyed.